rather frigid Friday morning. My name is Alex Maricelli, and I am the program manager here at Empire Justice. And my role essentially is I oversee the technical components of the grant, including the data reporting. So happy to sit here and talk this through with you guys. And again, thanks for joining us. I'm joined today by Ellie Pepper, who is our regional coordinator for the Hudson Valley and Northeastern part of New York.
Good morning, everybody.
So here's a quick snapshot of what we're going to go over today. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded, and we will be posting it and the data reporting slides on the portal early next week. And if you have any questions about how to access the portal or whatnot, feel free to reach out and we'll get you set up. And secondly, is pertaining to questions. We're going to go ahead and hold all questions till the end, just so we can get through the presentation. It won't take the full hour by any means. And you have two options to ask those questions. You can either type them into the chat box or the question box, and we'll answer them at the end, or you have an option to raise your hand, and after we're done with the presentation, we can unmute you and you can ask your question out loud verbally. And I also just want to introduce one more person who you may know through your interactions. Shannon Slytek recently joined our team as the math assistant for the math program, and she's joining us today and helping with coordinating the questions.
Hello, everyone.
So again, here's a quick snapshot of what we'll be going over today. We're just going to talk through the data points and a little 101 on reporting. Look at the year 3 reporting schedule, which you should have received already, but just to reiterate that. And then talk about your deliverables and what those mean. So why does the AG's office need your data? Essentially what we're doing is we are looking at your interaction with a client from the date of intake all the way to when either an outcome is resolved or when the case is closed. We're trying to see what's occurring on the ground so we can make changes at a higher level. We're looking for common trends, whether there are more frequent service errors that you are seeing and any correlating violations, and then coming up with targeted approaches to really attack those. So similar to the settlements that have occurred over the last couple of years and whatnot. So again, the AG's office is looking for data on a regular basis, so I can't stress the importance of it, and they are actually using it, which is huge. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. So before we get started and go into each individual data point, just a common couple questions. What if the client doesn't know the information or is trying to answer or it's hard to get? If they don't know it, simply leave the data field blank. You don't have to enter not applicable or don't know or what have you. Just leave it blank. If you can easily obtain that information, that's fantastic. But we don't want you going down to the city clerk's office and going into the basement and sorting through files cabinets just for one data point. Nothing extreme like that. And then kind of piggybacking off of that, please enter one of the prescribed values and just use your best judgment to see if they fit into one of those values. And we really appreciate your willingness to include explanations into each data point. We want to know what's going on. But we just ask that you insert that information into the last column, which is a comments field. So, and we read those as well, so please write them there. So the first section, this is just kind of walking through your data manual that was updated this month. If you haven't seen that already, it is in the portal, but we'll talk about the changes as we move forward. So this just refers to the record information. So the client ID, this is a huge, extremely critical field, as this is how we track the client's progression throughout your interaction with them. So what that means is it needs to remain the same across every data report. I can't stress this enough. That's how we track it. So the format must be the same along with the values. So please make sure that remains stagnant and all that good jazz. Kind of second in line is a HOPP ID. Now you only need to report on this if the client came to you through the HOPP call center. Similar to the client ID, it will remain the same and it won't change. And next to the staff, who is the advocate working with your client?
Alex, can I comment on something very quickly on the previous slide? I just want to clarify that that client ID should be, if you opened somebody when you first got funding in 2012 and you're still working with that person, it should be the same client ID.
Exactly. Yep, even across over the grant years, it needs to remain the same because that's counted as a carryover client, which we'll talk about later, the difference between that, or what that is. So now the demographic information on the next section. The first is the intake date. So that intake date should reflect the date of your first interaction with that client. When that client first walked in your door and went through that intake process. This date will not change over the course of your reporting, so it should just reflect that same date. Because again, we're trying to see how long the process is taking for homeowners, and that's how we can capture that. Now the service date, on the other hand, should reflect the last date, the most recent date the client received services within the reporting period. So what that means is, let's use the data report due on March 10th. That means that data report due on March 10th, the reporting period then is from January 1st all the way through February 28th. So within that time bracket, what was the last day of service with that client? So if it's February 28th, then you would just write that, or that would be a Saturday, so February 27th. So the next batch is more demographic information. So simply select the value that best represents your client. If they decline to answer, again, just leave that field blank. So these points should reflect, we want to know who is residing in the household. So 4 more nights per week. So again, for children, it's up through age 17, and then adults are 18 through 61 years of age, and then seniors are 62 years and older. So just a common question that occurs is if the household has adult children residing, like coming back, or just living at home, simply report them in the adults field. So income. Income should reflect the entire household income for the most recent year. So you don't have to go down to the cents and whatnot. You can round up to the nearest 5,000, but we're just simply trying to get an estimate as to what their income is. And then credit score, if you can obtain it, that's great. But again, don't go to any extreme measures. And then for household type, we were trying to garner what the dynamic of the household is, whether or not it's a single adult, or if it's a female-headed single-parent household, or a senior. So just select the value that best represents your client. So the next batch of questions is about the property. So just please keep in mind that the address field, the house number, street, all that good jazz, that should reflect where the property is resided, not where the homeowner is, if a homeowner is in a different location. So just please keep that in mind, and that the house must be in New York State. I know several organizations are on the either Pennsylvania or Vermont borders, but just make sure that the property must be in New York State in order to count under HOPP. So next, the zip code and county. I just want to note that the AG's office they frequently look for data based on the county level. So please, these fields are mandatory, and we need that information. So loan information. The first batch of data points should reflect, the loan at intake. We're trying to get a snapshot of where they are as when they come to see you, what the loan looks like and what's going on. So that information will not need to be updated throughout your interaction with a client. So first, we want to know the reason for distress, or why is the mortgage, what's going on. So whether it was a loss of income or non-payment of rental, what have you. So please select either the first or primary or secondary values that best represent that reasoning. And then we're looking for, the number of units on the mortgage, whether it's a single, just a one unit, or if it's a condo or duplex, what kind of house is it? And then what was the date of the property purchase? So for this one, the format should be in months or years, or if you want to do the month, date, years. But please use the date format as opposed to entering like 22 years ago or what have you, just because that changes. So please use that date field. That would be greatly appreciated. So for those of you who have seen the spreadsheet and are not new, or those of you who are new to the HOPP program, I should say, if you haven't seen the spreadsheet yet, note that if you are assisting a homeowner with a second lien throughout your interaction, you can report on that information in the headers that end in 2. So what I mean by that is there's loan amount 2, or what's this, like you'll see that on the spreadsheet, but just know that's what that's referring to as a second lien. So again, we're looking for that snapshot of the loan. So what was the origination date? What was the original amount? What was the term? And again, that should be in years, not months. And then who is the current loan owner? So again, just more information at intake. What is the current principal, whether or not it's fixed or ARM, the rate, and the total monthly payment. So that should include your principal, interest, and taxes, and also insurance. So loan status. This is the first value change that I mentioned earlier in the most recent updates. We're changing the value at least 120 days late, and we added some new values. So just note that for this new value, it's just no longer valid for clients with an intake date after January 1st, 2015. You do not need to go back through and update those clients by any means. It's just kind of on here on out, we're going to use all of these new values. And the reason behind that is, when we first started the program, we didn't think, nobody thought that we're just adjusting it based on the length of time at the loan statuses. So next, we want to know who is a loan servicer, what bank is holding the mortgage, and any violations that occurred, and whether or not it's changed during your interaction or during the reporting period. So settlement conferences. Note that you only need to report the number of conferences that occurred within the reporting period. You don't have to accumulate that. Our system automatically generates that total number, so just do it per reporting period. And then we want to also know what was the date of the first settlement conference. So just note that that should reflect only the first date. You don't need to report on all the dates that are coming up in the next couple months, simply that first date. And then whether or not a bad faith motion was filed. The next section is about services. So for counseling service hours, you can report the cumulative number of service hours that occurred throughout your entire interaction with your client, from the beginning, that first intake date up through today. So for those carryover clients, and what a carryover client is, are clients who were served in the last grant for HOPP Year 2 that are carried over into HOPP Year 3 that you're continuing to serve. So just keep reporting those hours on a cumulative basis. And again, it should be in hours, not minutes. I know Counselor Max users, that's different. So note that you're fine in how you pull your reports. So then we want to know next what services were conducted within the reporting period. And out of those, what are the most significant? So as you know, you might work with a client over 4 or 5 times in the span of 2 months. So out of those 5 times, we want to know the 2 most significant services. And that it might not correlate to the service date. So what that means is if you work with Bob on, let's say, January 6th, 8th, and 10th, and on the 6th you submitted a loan mod, and on the 10th you attended a settlement conference with him, and then you also, on the 16th, advised him. We want to know, obviously, those first 2, right? So that's what you report on the HOPP data report. And then just take note of the supplemental fields. So this is what it looks like. This is just a different version than what's in your data manual. And again, this will be available on the portal if you want to print this out. But all the supplemental fields are, what they are information that you should report on in a different data point. So again, if you assisted with a relocation, we want to know what their new housing situation is and what have you. So these values in yellow, these are more amendments to the last amendments to the data manual. So if you assisted with a tax lien, post-default counseling, and post-modification counseling. These are just after talking with advocates, this should just allow you to capture more information. So again, you can start using those values moving forward. Okay. So for those of you serving Superstorm Sandy victims, you can report the services under the primary Sandy-related services field. So modification request status. This field should be updated every time the status of the submitted mod changes. So what that means is, after you did your initial application and whatnot, or submission, we want to know if the lender or servicer requested additional documents, or if it went into a trial stage, or if it was denied. We're tracking that, so just make sure you're updating that field. And then just note that it needs to correlate to the outcome reported. So kind of going along the same lines that it needs to be updated. If a client has, let's say, a client has a mod status of that they did not qualify for a mod, yet in the outcome it says that the mortgage, they received a mod, something's a little off there. So they just need to be matching. So just keep that in mind as you fill out your data reports.
And I'll jump in on this really quick and comment that if it's a trial payment plan, that's not an outcome yet. So you don't need to do the outcome until it's actually a permanent modification. So if it's just a trial mod, that's all you're putting in. You're putting in that it's a trial mod, but you don't have to put an outcome in yet.
Exactly. Thanks, Allie. And then kind of going to the next point, if the client received a final mod, note that you need to report that in the outcome fields as well. And we'll go over those in a couple minutes. But the reason behind that is that the mortgage, that outcome, receiving a final mod, is a foreclosure prevented outcome, which counts towards your deliverable. So it's really crucial that you complete that field as well. But again, we'll go over that in a couple minutes. Or right now. So outcomes. So note that you do not have to fill out these fields unless you have achieved like a milestone or outcome with the client. So you can obviously have multiple outcomes over the life of your representation with them. But if you don't have an outcome during that reporting period, you can just simply leave it blank. And then kind of tying into that, if you have 2 outcomes for one mortgage, those aren't weighted, so you don't need to prioritize them at all. You can just report them in the first and second fields. And then just take note of, again, the supplemental reporting fields, which we'll go over now. So again, here are the outcome values, and then the supplemental fields that are required. Again, if you can easily obtain that information, I'm just going to stress that again. So one thing I just want to point out is this guy in red, the homeowner obtained private loan or grant funds. If you are assisting a client who received a MAP loan through the Mortgage Assistance Program, this is the outcome that you would select. Just for a variety of reasons, we are not adding any fields for MAP, so you can simply select this value right here.
So and one other thing, I'm sorry, Alex, yeah, client outcome unknown. Again, you don't need to put that outcome value in just because you're still working with the homeowner and you don't have a final result yet. If you don't have a final result, leave the outcome value blank.
Exactly. Yeah, that should be only when the case is closed and you don't know what happened with the client. Exactly. Okay, so you'll notice, again, these are just the remaining outcomes and the supplemental fields. Just note that this is a new value, the resolved non-mortgage lien, so you can select that moving on forward. So the remaining batch of information reflects the modified mortgage. You know, what is a new principal and new terms as a part of the agreement? Did the type change? And if so, please report that and whatnot. One thing I want to point out is that if nothing changed and it remained the same, don't write same in that box, in that field. Simply re-enter that information. And we'll go over that in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to say that here. And then for the new monthly payment, please report that for both trial and final mods. So again, we're looking for the total amount of principal forgiven. What is for the amount of forbearance? If it was a short sale happened, what was the price of the short sale and the date that it occurred? And then we're looking for whether or not it was fully forgiven. Again, if there was a deed in lieu, what was the date of that? Excuse me. Any cash benefits and new housing. So, you know, if the housing situation changed, like I think we talked about earlier in the presentation, but we want to know what's their new status, where they are, and if they move in with family and friends, or in a rental unit. Please report that there. So date of case closure. I can't stress this enough. When you close a case, just note that you need to have an outcome reported. If you don't know, that is where you select that client outcome unknown, but just be cognizant of that. Now, if after you close out a case, if that client came back to see you for additional services, you will simply use that same client ID. You know, we are tracking this and trying to see if, you know, we can tell if a client was closed out and then came back for services. We want to know why they're coming back and what's going on. So again, you'll just use that same client ID and update their information using simply a new service date and then the correlating services, and then enter, and then just simply delete the case close date. So now just a quick overview of the How Data Reporting 101. So when you are reporting new clients, you're going to enter all the available information that is easily accessible. You know, what was the actual date of intake, reporting the most significant services, the cumulative, like the total number of service hours since the beginning of the grant period or through your interaction with them. With that said, all clients with services covered by any portion of HOPP can be included in the data report. And then one household equates to one client. You know, you might have a married couple who a spouse will come in and see you and work with you on their mortgage. Additionally, a second spouse will come see you separately, again, working with you. Just note that they are considered the same household, and they should be reported as one unique group. So existing clients, if you work with a client during the reporting period, you must update their HOPP information to include the services provided. So that includes a service date, the services provided, obviously, any counseling minutes, you know, how long you work with them, just update that cumulative number, and then any conferences and what have you. So just make sure you're updating that. So kind of moving on to the next bullet, you know, this happens quite often, you know, if you forget to report on a client who was serviced in a previous reporting period, that happens. So what you will do is you're simply going to include them on your next data report, highlight them, make them yellow or whatnot so they stand out, and then shoot me an email letting me know that you're including additional clients, just so I can look for them and ensure they're included, and then we'll update them. We'll add them to your numbers and make sure they're counted. So I can't stress this enough how important it is to review your data report prior to submission. Just even taking 5 minutes just to look it over and whatnot and comb through will really save a lot of time for you, just to make sure there aren't any errors. Some common data reporting mistakes, you know, the service date, if it's outside the reporting period, again, it won't be counted in your data submission. Loan terms, you know, whether it's in years opposed to months. Counseling hours we talked about earlier. Again, the conference number as well, whether it should be reporting period as opposed to cumulative. So just make sure you're just, again, we're looking for a snapshot of what happened within that reporting period. Spelling out a servicer's name. You know, all of you are across the state and have different acronyms for the banks you use. Like for example, up in Rochester where I am, we have a bank who is CNB, but to those of you who are from across the state are like, what is that? You know, it's actually Canandaigua National Bank. So we can't decipher those acronyms, so please ensure you're spelling that whole thing out. And then lastly, you know, again, just ensure you're completing those supplemental fields. Again, I can't stress that, emphasize on that enough, how important that is. And then for all data points that contain new in that title pertaining to the mortgage that was modified, just again re-enter that amount. You don't have to enter in right same. Again, we don't want you to, so please just re-enter that information in those fields.
So Alex, I'd like to just kind of make a little bit of a point about the service date and the carrying over of clients, if this is a good time to do that.
Absolutely.
So in the most recent data report that you all sent in, you probably had several clients that you carried over from year 2 into year 3. And if you have them on your report but don't have a service date within the reporting period, which was October 1st through December 31st of 2014, although they're on the report, they won't be counted as within your numbers for the first quarter because they did not receive a service. However, you're welcome to leave them on the report. A lot of people do that because it makes things a lot easier, but just whenever you do have a service date, make sure that you update it on the report. Otherwise, they won't ever get counted. It's altogether possible that you saw somebody in the end of September and counted them under year 2 and didn't see them again in October, November, and December, but saw them in January. So just make sure that you keep your service dates up to date so that Alex can be sure to count all of the numbers and you guys can get credit for all of the hard work that you're doing.
Exactly. Thanks, Allie. And just kind of not pertaining to the carryover clients, I just wanted to make one more point. I'm going to use the upcoming data report as an example. If when you pull your report and you started to see clients in March, like for the report due on March 10th, that comprises of the reporting period from January 1st through February 28th. If you saw those clients in March, note that they won't be recounted on this report, but they'll go towards the next batch and those deliverables. So if you did service, again, make sure they are within those reporting dates, that reporting period. So just a couple more mistakes just to be cognizant of. We're providing explanations outside of the comments field. You know, again, we so appreciate that you want to share this information with us and we want to know it. But again, please report that in the comments field because that's where we'll look at it there. So just take note that your client doesn't have to be officially closed in your client and your case management system or your CMS in order for you to close them with HOPP. So what that means is if you are working with a client, helping them with their, I would say, with their mortgage and submitting a loan mod or whatnot, after they receive that final mod, you still may be providing outside services not related to the foreclosure world. Or you might be doing like pre-counseling or something along those lines. So you can close them out in HOPP and still be working on them, but just note that they don't actually have to be closed within your CMS in order to report them or close them out with us. So foreclosure prevention, again, we're going to go over that in a couple minutes, but note that it doesn't have, in order for a client to receive a foreclosure prevented, they do not have to have their case does not have to be closed. So you can report on them, again, one of those milestones throughout your interaction. And then lastly, again, kind of piggybacking off the foreclosure prevented, having a mod status of final, received, and accepted does not equate to a foreclosure prevented. All those foreclosure prevented are captured from the outcome field. So again, that's critical, and so please take note of that. So everyone should have seen this already, but again, here's the year 3 reporting schedule. Again, on March 10th, you have a data report due. You didn't hear me say this a gazillion times already. Through, again, January 1st through February 28th. And then also your interim report is due at the same time. So that comprises of your narrative and a 5-month financial. And if you have any questions about those reporting documents, everything is in the portal on the resources page. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll get you that into those templates and whatnot. So grant deliverables, a hot topic, seeing as how summary figures were just sent out. So again, we're tracking your progress against your proposed deliverables under the client served, which again is a number of unique clients serviced by your organization. So what I mean by unique is that if, again, as oftentimes happens, you are reporting on clients across many reporting periods, because we're tracking that progression. But even though you are servicing them each reporting period, they only count as once because they are one household. So that's what that means. And then foreclosure prevented, so these are all the values that are classified as a foreclosure prevented. Again, these slides will be available and you can print this out. It might be helpful for you and your advocates to have on a handy basis when completing the data reports so you can report these accurately. So what foreclosure prevented, I'm sorry, my mouth is struggling today. Foreclosures prevented class, it means achieving one of the following final outcomes. So particularly I want to talk about the mortgage modified field. So mods that are in a trial period are not considered a foreclosure prevented because it's not a final outcome. Only mods that are in that final received and accepted stage are counted as a foreclosure prevented. Again, if you have any questions about these, feel free to reach out and we will get you the information or help you walk through it. And just take note that even though a client might have multiple foreclosure prevented outcomes listed, there's only one foreclosure prevented per client or per household. So just keep that in mind. And just moving forward, if at any time you are concerned that your organization is either underperforming or you're not going to meet your projected deliverables, please reach out and contact your regional coordinator as soon as possible. The earlier the better, and we can work with you and help to address that. So that's it for our presentation. Again, thanks everyone for listening. Now we'll turn it over to questions. And again, If you have anything, you can either type it into the question box or raise your hand, and we will be happy to answer them. So we have a question. First one is, what if the client was closed and then reopened? Do we need to keep the same client ID as the last time, or do we report the old intake date or the new one? So great question. So if they're closed and then reopened, you're going to use that same client ID and just simply update the services. So keep that intake date the same and just update all the correlating services that were provided. Another question regarding the settlement conferences. The date of the first settlement conference, is that the date of the first settlement conference ever, or within that reporting period? It's the date of the first settlement conference ever. So we want to know if it was back in 2012, we want to know that. So just report the very, very first one. Just reading through questions. What if we have a client from HOPP year 1? Should we report that client in this report? If you are continuing to work with that client, then you on that report. Jane, I see your question. I'll follow up with you after this call about that. So just note that I will talk to you, Jane. Do we capture MAP households on the HOPP report? So yes, so what you're going to do is if you're working with a HOPP client who receives MAP funds or MAP grant, you're going to report that outcome, homeowner received private grant funds. So select that outcome when you're updating your reports.
Alex, can I just wanted to comment about Jane's question, because there may be other people on the webinar that have that same question.
Okay.
So I just want to read it out so that if people have the same question, they can reach out directly to Alex, okay? It's client received services in year 2 and was closed out with a modification. Year 3, the client is back with a default on the modification. We're again working with the homeowner and the lender. Do we issue a new client ID or use the same one? I suspect that more and more counselors are going to be seeing this, so if you have this question, you can reach out to Alex directly.
Thanks, Ellie. A couple people about instructions for transferring data. Contact me. There are instructions available in the portal, and I'm happy to walk that through with you or help you in any way that I can. So again, feel free to reach out, but they are available in the portal as well. We have another question. We have a client from year 1 who has redefaulted. Considering Counselor Max will assign a new case ID when a new case is started, should that still be reported using the original client ID? Yes, it should be, because again, we want to know if that client redefaulted. We want to know what happened. So again, use that same client ID.
But the other point is that Counselor Max may have a new case, but the client ID remains the same in Counselor Max.
So we have another question regarding foreclosure dismissed. Please describe foreclosure dismissed. We have cases in default, and for whatever reason, the bank has dismissed, likely unable to confirm documents. Joan, I'm a little fuzzy on your question. Could you clarify? Or you either raise your hand, I'm happy to unmute you. Joan? Okay, Joan, if you could either type it in or we can follow up after this call as well. And again, if anybody has any more questions, feel free to type them in or raise your hand and we'll be happy to answer them. I just want to throw it out there that last year I offered some HOPP tips and tricks to reviewing your data prior to submitting, and just to make it easier for you all, that could help quite a bit. So I'm happy to offer that again. I have a little how-to sheet, and I'm also willing to do some mini trainings, if you will. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out and we'll set that up. Does anyone have any more questions? Again, feel free to type them in or raise your hand. Or again, as we move forward, feel free to reach out to myself or Ellie, and we will help in any way we can. We have a question regarding rental properties. Can rental properties be reported on HOPP? Are they homes that the homeowner is renting out, Marcella, or is it a rental property that the client is residing and paying rent?
Right. I mean, I'm wondering, is it a homeowner who owns a rental, or are you asking about tenants?
Hey, Marcella, you're live if you want to try some clarification of the question.
She wrote here if they're already reporting primary residence but have another property. So I think the question is, if it sounds like she may be helping a homeowner on their primary residence, but they also have a rental that is in foreclosure, and she's wondering if she can also report on that. That is what I think the question is.
Yeah. Marcella, let us confer with the HOPP team, and we'll get back to you on that. Are there any more questions? Again, feel free to raise your hand or type them into the question box. All right. Well, again, if you have any more either questions or anything, or you just want to chat, feel free to reach out to us, either email or via phone, and we're happy to help. Again, thank you for taking the time for joining us today. And Ellie, thanks for being here, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Stay warm, everybody.
Try to. Take care. Bye.